Well, at the beginning of 2020, our politicians decriminalised abortion and introduced one of the most liberal and extreme laws in the world, effectively legalising abortion to 40 weeks with token safeguards. And to prove how liberal the law is, you just have to look at the trend lines. The latest abortion report has just been released a couple of hours ago. In fact, I haven't seen any mainstream media coverage of it yet. Let's take a deep breath, something that won't be afforded to thousands of little children, and see how bad this report is. So the Abortion Services Annual Report has been released very quietly by the Ministry of Health. Quietly because I think deep down they know exactly what abortion is, the killing of an innocent, unborn child. And remember, the law was rammed through by our politicians in March 2020, while we as a nation were all preparing to go into lockdown for COVID in order to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. To be kind. But our then Prime Minister, Jacinda, who had recently had her first child, prioritised this liberalisation of abortion. I mean, it really seems like a sick joke, doesn't it? In fact, the report starts off with this statement. I have the report here, and it's by the Director General of Health, Dr. Diana Safati, and she says this: I want to acknowledge that while this report places an emphasis on data, we never forget that behind the numbers and graphs are individuals, families and whānau making difficult decisions. The Ministry of Health is determined to ensure every person has access to high quality and timely abortion information and healthcare when and where they need it. I mean, the cognitive dissonance rings loud. So what does it show? The latest abortion statistics make grim and upsetting reading. A 23% increase in abortion since the decriminalisation of abortion in March 2020. I've shown it with the two lines there. Just over 13,000 in 2020 to over 16,000 in 2023. Almost 4,000 additional little lives aborted over those 3 years alone because of the law change. And if you look at just the last 12 months, there's been a 15% increase from 2022 to 2023. Just in 1 year, it's the highest number of abortions since 2011. And you can see on the graph there that abortions have been falling and remaining at a low level until about 2020 when they started trending upwards. This latest figure represents an average of almost 45 children per day killed in the womb in New Zealand. 45 per day. And if you look at the trend from when the law was liberalised and decriminalised under Jacinda Ardern's watch, but hey, remember, with the support of the majority of politicians in the House at that time, there has been a 23% increase in abortions. 23%. Maybe that's why the media haven't been keen to tell you about this. They know this is a death cult dressed up in reproductive freedom. But this increases the sad reality which we predicted would happen when the law was changed. Now, the ratio of abortions has increased since the law changed from 18.6% to about 22.1% of known pregnancies ending in an abortion. So that's almost 1 in 4 pregnancies. Now, the report talks a lot about early abortions. They say medical abortions are also on the increase, above surgical procedures. And that's because pro-abortionists think that early abortions are somehow better. It appeases their conscience by saying, well, as the Director General of Health says in her opening, she says, quote, gestation at the time of abortion has decreased across all ethnic groups, demonstrating better outcomes for those seeking abortion services, end quote. Yeah, somehow they think it's better to kill them early. I mean, that's like saying it's okay to kill a young child, but not an older child. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's still a life, isn't it? It still harms the pregnant woman, both physically and emotionally. And it's younger women where there's an increase in demand. If you have a look at this graph, note the upward trend for the orange line down the bottom there, which is 15 to 19-year-old. The yellow line, second from the top, 25 to 29, and grey, 20 to 24 years old. Yeah, how's that sex education and that safe sex messaging going through, team? Yeah, now broken down by ethnicity, sadly, Māori are disproportionately high. 26% of all abortions are by Māori, and yet they represent approximately 17% of the population. Oh, by the way, other, that yellow block, is generally white people, European, who shall not be identified. Actually, by the way, the word female was used a lot in this report, but it was in the charts. But the discussion always talked about a person. There was no mention at all of woman, women, or mother. I mean, is that progress that at least they said female in the charts? I still just think they can't bring themselves to say that dreaded word woman or mother. Now, the report has a whole section on responsiveness to Māori, and they appear very excited when they say, quote, Māori were accessing abortion services at higher rates than other ethnic groups across 14 of 20 districts of Aotearoa, New Zealand, end quote. Yeah, sickening. Apparently that's for celebration, that they're disproportionately high. But as part of its commitment to the principles of equity and with the intention of achieving equitable abortion health outcomes, they have a vision for abortion services that focuses on services meeting the needs of rangatahi. Apparently this is equity, more abortion services for Māori, easier abortions. Well, I say, what about the needs of the unborn rangatahi, the unborn Māori child? But here's an interesting observation. The higher the deprivation, in other words, the poorer the parents, the more likely for an abortion. The wealthier you are, the less likely you are to have an abortion. Does that mean that wealthy women don't believe in abortion rights or reproductive freedom? I mean, are they Trump voters? No, this is just one of the sad realities of abortion. Often the decision is made based on economics. We can't afford a child. But as we know, abortion is not the solution. We need to support parents so that abortion is not an option. We need policies that give life. But the majority of our politicians have been focused on giving death. Now, there's a big push for medical abortions with phone consultations and telemedicine. You know, abortions done at home, do-it-yourself abortions. And as you can see there, the blue line is early medical abortions. So that's with pills. And the orange line is surgical abortions. Now, if you think that early medical abortions sound better, you need to watch Dr. Norman McLean on our YouTube channel explain exactly what a early medical abortion is and why they are still problematic for the woman and, of course, for the unborn child. And I'll put a link to that video in the explainer. But, you know, the Ministry of Health and abortion supporters think it's just like Uber Eats, where you get the medication and do it at home. No supervision, no support, just like ordering pizza. And you can see in this graph, the grey represents the in-person attendance by the mother. It's about 1/3 for each age group. So 2/3 are being done by telehealth, over the phone, couriering the drugs perhaps, no oversight, no personal care, no follow-up. Actually, I'll come back to that follow-up issue as well, but let's have a look at the complications. And according to the report, it says that almost 360 abortion procedures were associated with a complication at the time of abortion. 273 emergency abortions and 50 surgical procedures. And 35 later medical procedures were associated with the complication. You see there, the most complications were with early medical abortions. But of course, you know, they're the ones to have apparently. Now, as in prior years, the most commonly reported complication includes a retained placenta, products following a medical abortion, and retained products or hemorrhage following a surgical abortion. 358 women. Yeah, it doesn't sound quite as healthy, high quality, and timely as they make out, doesn't it? Does it? And 36 women didn't engage with requests for follow-up appointments following termination of pregnancy. So what happened? Well, who knows? But, according to the report, it's only a small proportion, so it doesn't really matter, apparently. Now, let's just deal with the late-term abortion aspect. Now, firstly, the law, because the politicians have done a very good job, helped by the media, of masking what actually happened. Previously, the Crimes Act allowed for an abortion after 20 weeks gestation only in exceptional circumstances. Statistics New Zealand data showed that before the law change, 800 late-term abortions had been performed over the last 10 years, where there was no danger to the physical health or life of the mother. That's the reason they often say for late-term abortions, but 91% of all late-term abortions, it wasn't about protecting the life of the mother. But the new law means that late-term abortions will be available to women if the abortion provider, quote, reasonably believes the abortion is clinically appropriate in all the circumstances, having regard to the woman's physical and mental health and well-being, end quote. Well, that's a very broad subjective test because the terms physical health, mental health and well-being are deliberately not defined by the bill. And given the policy intent to make abortion more accessible, it's difficult to see many instances in which an abortion would reasonably be refused, except maybe if the abortionist couldn't do it. A baby could be aborted after 20 weeks as long as the abortionist who intends to perform the abortion considered that the abortion was appropriate in the circumstances with a nod from a colleague, another abortion provider. Now, the ministry are very slippery when giving details about late-term abortions, and they don't always report the breakdown. They didn't in last year's report. They often just put averages. But here's what we do know. In 2021, there were 104 late-term abortions, 20 weeks plus. 104, remember that, 104. In 2023, last year, there were 174. 104 up to 174. That's a 67% increase in late-term abortions. And just to show you how high that 174 is, the number of late-term abortions since 2012 has never gone above 100. Now, it's 174. Don't let them deceive you. Late-term abortions under the old law were only for exceptional circumstances. Late-term abortions are now legal with the approval of 2 abortion doctors who have no conscience when it comes to ending the life of an unborn child. And they'll be doing very well financially out of the decision they make. Now, Section 6 of the report talks about abortion within the reproductive journey, which of course is an oxymoron, of course, abortion and reproductive journey. But what it shows is this graph that 56% of women who get an abortion are already mothers with children, more than half. The blue area down the bottom there for each ethnicity is women with no children, so it averages between about 35 and 55%. But all the other segments are those with children already. They will have fully experienced the life-changing growth of that child in their womb, a life beyond any doubt to them. And what's worse is that this is not the first abortion for a third of abortions. For some, it's their 4th, 5th, or even higher numbered abortion. Now, I would show you the graph to that, but interestingly enough, they printed the wrong one in the report. So I have told them, contacted them and said the graph's wrong. But the key point is this is not the exceptional circumstance to have an abortion as we are often told. This is sometimes a form of birth control. Now, in Section 7, they talk about counselling for just 1 page. And they say, the ministry is responsible for services related to abortion counselling. Yeah, that's a bit like putting the fox in charge of the hen house. They then say, the Act states that abortion counselling is not mandatory for a person accessing abortion services, and that last year 47% of facilities providing abortion services also provided pre-abortion counselling services. Yeah, that will be real independent advice, won't it? No conflict of interest there. I mean, it's a bit like going to the butcher and asking, should I go vegan? Or going to a Green Party AGM and saying you want to stop smoking dope. I mean, it's not counselling. The advice won't be the very best independent advice. And look, the professional counselling associations in New Zealand should be calling out this farce and this conflict of interest. But they won't, because they probably can't even figure out their gender. It also means that more than half of the abortionist centres don't have counselling on offer. In fact, the report says that 2,500 women accessing an abortion, only 15% of the women in total that had an abortion, 2,500, wanted counselling. Just 15%. Now, that figure is key, because can you just remind me again how we're checking for coercion from the boyfriend to have an abortion, or sex selection, or whether there has been a sexual crime committed, such as rape, or whether the woman actually wants to keep the child but can't figure out how she can manage? How is that being assessed again? Oh, right, it's a conveyor belt. Easy, accessible, quick. Now, there is just one good part of the report. Section 10, Abortion Workforce. And it says that the abortion workforce is just 387 people, consisting of just 137 so-called medical staff, 214 nurses, and, yeah, I'm sorry to say, 36 midwives. The majority of the workforce were of European descent, apparently, because, well, we know why, eh? Asian, Māori and Pacifica medical professionals really don't want to be part of this industry. In fact, the report says that Māori practitioners represent just 7.8% of providers, 30 people in total, and Pacifica practitioners have dropped from 17 to just 7. Brilliant. Now, to put that in perspective, there are about 17,000 doctors in New Zealand and 58,000 nurses, so the abortion workforce represents 0.3, 0.4% of the workforce. In other words, 99.6% want nothing to do with it. And to you, I say thank you. But the Ministry of Health says, quote, encouraging cultural diversity in the workforce and supporting the development of cultural competency amongst abortion service providers continues to be a priority for the ministry, end quote. Now, just one other thing of concern. In last year's report, they said that 6 abortion places had acknowledged that sex selection abortions were a reason, or possibly a reason, for requesting an abortion. In this year's report, I couldn't find any mention at all about sex selection being a concern. Yep, apparently it's just off the radar and they're not really concerned. Look, it's depressing reading, but it's what we predicted, sadly, and it is the legacy of this so-called act of kindness. But anyone who has viewed the ultrasound of an unborn child will know that this policy is a gross abuse of human rights. The humanity of a child is not based on whether it's wanted or not wanted. It should never be based on that. I mean, it worked in the 70s, but it's flat earth science now. We've seen the ultrasounds. We've seen the fetal development. To support abortion, you have to park your conscience and science in a deep, dark vault. Abortion denies the humanity of the unborn child, and we will continue to fight for the rights of the unborn child and the welfare of the pregnant mum. Please join us and fight for what's right.